Hello everyone and welcome to the season finale of Jan's Opening Clinic 20, the show where I try to answer Chess24 premium users' opening questions, chess opening questions I should say, to the best of my knowledge. Once we're done with this show, we will start a new round of questioning. So check the Chess24 news site around Tuesday the 6th or the 7th? Where's my calendar? Tuesday the 7th of August, and post your question there and I will answer them in the new season. So without further ado, let's jump into the last remaining questions. What you got? We have Mr. Lerxt. He's saying, "Hi Jan, what do you recommend for white against the Leningrad Dutch? Thanks." If I recall correctly, Lerxt is a Leningrad Dutch aficionado, and I'm well known to not be a Leningrad Dutch aficionado, so he's trying to get me to tell him something, then use that against me. But that's what we're here for. So let's get into the bad old Leningrad Dutch. What was the position he gave? He's forcing me to go for the main line. I hope he's not forcing me to go king to g1. I'm assuming this means castle. If not, even I will have a hard time making a case against the Leningrad Dutch. But let's get to it. 1 d4, f5, g3, knight to f6, bishop g2, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, castles, let's say castles. Pawn to c4, pawn to d6. I'll stick with the main line. You can certainly make a case for going b3, bishop b2, b4, even c4 and so on. But knight to c3, and well, he didn't really specify what line he wants here. So let's look at the most common moves. In general, I think white has many ways to fight for an opening advantage here. One move that's a little offbeat, but that some people like, is to move knight to c6, when white should probably accept the challenge. Grab space in the center. After d5. Black can either go knight to e5, leading to a very sharp position. That should be better for white, but it's sort of tricky, I have to admit. Knight takes e5, de. I think the best setup is to go like queen b3, followed by rook to d1 and then c5, which is better for white, but you have to be sort of accurate. There's also knight a5 instead of knight e5, which, to be honest, I've never taken very seriously. I think b3 is supposed to be good for white, and then knight e4, just take it. But if you don't want any adventures, you can also go, let's say, queen a4, c5, d takes c, which, as far as I know, is also better for white. So knight c6 is not what most people do. Nowadays, the most popular moves are pawn to c6 and queen to e8. Let's maybe start with pawn to c6. In general, as mentioned, white has very many different ways. You can go here, rook e1, rook b1, b4. You name it, it's a sensible move. I tend to like setups with just going b3, either fianchettoing this bishop and then trying to prepare. Pushing e4 in the center, sometimes pushing d5, sometimes the bishop can go to a3 to annoy black a little. So my general policy is b3, can't be too bad. Black of course has various ways to meet that stuff. Knight a6 is what they normally play in practice in this position. White goes bishop b2, and black decides what he wants to do. There's many moves here, like I think queen a5 is quite a common move, trying to prepare e5. One trick that I like, I'm sure I've mentioned this in previous opening clinics, but I like to repeat myself too, because I don't have that much to say. So out of the 7-8 things that I know, I try to shuffle them around. Here, the trick that I like is that you go queen d2, e5, and now you do nothing. Rook a1, and you hope that black blunders with pawn to e4. When you go knight takes e4, and you win a pawn. Hooray. So since e5 to e4 is not really a threat, black is a little stuck here, and white is better. Therefore, instead of queen to a5, they sometimes play queen c7, tending to prepare e5, when white has a bit of a choice once again. The sharpest move is rook to c1. Then after e5, play can get very sharp. I think there's some computer lines like, I don't think I know. Some computer lines like knight b5 and either queen e7 or queen d8. Queen d8 is again Buhmann against Vallejo, would look good for white. After queen e7, I think this is a recent Nepomniachtchi game. There's some sharp stuff as well. c5, queen d6, takes. e4, knight g5, and you know, you guys take it from here. White is a little better because of f3 coming. So these lines aren't easy for black, but extremely sharp. If you don't want as sharp, you can always play d5 in such a structure, and in my opinion, be a little better. You typically get something like this, where, you know, computers will say it's close to equality, but I always believe in white because the black king doesn't quite have enough shelter here. Whatever, you just maneuver around. Black might hold, but I'm comfortable playing such positions with white. So that's c6 business. Instead of c6, I'm aware there's alternatives. I'm just giving you the rundown. This is opening clinic, not a video series. There's also the move queen to e8. Often trying to keep options open about playing c6, or maybe e5 immediately. For simplicity's sake, once again, white has many promising moves here. Let's go b3 again. When, yeah, e5 is possible, but very dangerous for black. Then you take and go e4. And the central construction is a little shaky. Theory continues here, of course, knight c6. I think knight d5 is the smartest move. And black is under pressure. Rook f7, knight g5. All kinds of bad things could happen to black. Queen d7, I think you take e4, knight g5, gf. Some of like rook b1. None of this is really much of a picnic. So most black players, most Leningrad experts, they wouldn't play e5, but they would play something like knight a6, I guess, again. Keeping their options open. When now I like once again, there's options, but I like now preventing black from going e5 by putting the bishop on a3. Well, it's not so easy to go e5. And normally now they switch plans and they start playing like c6, rook b8, b5, stuff like that. But white is better. White is always a bit better in such positions because, well, his king is safer. One day we'll go e4, these pawns will be exchanged, and the white king will have more shelter than the black king. For example, something like this. Black is not lost, but once the play opens up, he will feel that his king is all alone, without any f-pawn to keep him warm at night. And that's typically, in my opinion, the problem with the Leningrad Dutch. It leads to complicated positions, and it's not unplayable. But once the battle develops a little bit, sooner or later, the king on g8 will start feeling the heat. So, not a complete rundown, but I believe for a 5-minute repertoire, that's as good as you're gonna get on this program. So, best of luck, Lerxt, with the Leningrad Dutch. Now you can try to look for antidotes against it. What's next? Grandmaster Passion. What is the more promising direction in the fight for an opening advantage against the Marshall Gambit? Marshall Gambit moves 8 a4, b4, 9 a5 isn't so Aronian, or 8 d3, d6, 9 bishop d2 as in Karana Aronian. Yeah, those are the two topical lines, and I think we have covered both of these lines in quite some detail in this current season, because I've had questions earlier during episode, I believe during Opening Clinic 20, about both 9 bishop to d2 and about this 8 a4 business. So I'm not sure how much I want to repeat myself in every clinic, but let's briefly put it on the board. e4, e5, good old Marshall. Marshall Matters, 2018. And the question is, this trendy line with d3, d6, bishop d2, which, yeah, Grishuk's idea, was played in the candidates by first Grishuk and then by Karana against Aronian, or nowadays, pretty much the main line, a4, b4, a5, d6, d3. Which one has more longevity? In my opinion, it's 8 a4. When, of course, black has a choice between b4 and bishop b7, but most players don't like to go bishop b7, standard speech. So they like to play this position, a4, b4, a5, d6, d3, and after bishop e6. Yeah, this topic has been reopened after people discovered, as we've previously discussed, that this structure with bishop takes e6 is not so easy for black. And I think that discussion will continue to go on, and the structure will continue not being so easy for black. In fact, we are seeing to have the first specialist, like Peter Svidler, try setups without an early bishop e6. Like I think he played rook b8 recently. Did he? In a game against Yu Yang, something like h3, then playing h6, followed by rook e8 and bishop f8. So I believe the discussions here will be ongoing. I personally believe that black should be alright, as I've explained in more detail earlier as well. After bishop e6, takes, but these positions aren't easy to play. While d3, bishop d2, I think black players, there has only been like 10 games or something, so this has not been settled. But I do believe that black players eventually will agree on a setup that sort of closes the line for white. I'm not sure if that setup will be bishop to g4, c3, d5, or if it maybe will be a move like bishop to b7 here, which typically I don't like against d3, e4, but the bishop on d2 also does look fairly silly. Certain setups. Ivan Sokolov, I think, played this twice recently. So, to answer the question, I don't expect d3, bishop d2 to stick around, and I very much expect a4, b4, a5, d6, d3 to stick around. So that's the more promising direction in the fight for an opening advantage, in my opinion. Joantspain, Juan T. Spain, saying, "Hi Jan, it's interesting how 20 years ago the main challenge seemed to be how to equalize with black against white's main lines, while now it feels like the other way around, and the main challenge is to find anything for white against black's main lines. All Kramnik's fault, question mark. 20 years ago, that's what, 98? I'm not sure it was the case back then, but of course, there is a point to be made that the trend has become to play slightly more solid openings at the highest level. Maybe, yeah, clearly because of Kramnik's influence with the Berlin and the Petrov, and also because of the rise of the engines, the stronger, the Stockfishes and Rybkas and Houdinis of the world were getting. The more openings were, yeah, considered to be slightly shaky. Some Sicilians, I'm guessing, are somewhat less popular than they used to be, while some e4, e5 lines, solid lines, became a little more popular, even though, of course, the Najdorf, for example, is still very much alive and kicking. But since computers are so good, I guess they tend to show us the way how black can equalize, and you are right, that they do make it tougher to come up with new ideas for white, because everyone, of course, can switch on their computer and see how black is supposed to play. And I believe with correct play from both sides, that black should equalize in the end. So I'm not sure we can blame Kramnik, but yeah, I don't disagree with the notion. Anyway, I have a question concerning the London system, as you do. Is there anything wrong with playing 1 d4, d5, 2 bishop f4, c5, instead of playing 2 knight f6, 3 e3, c5? No, there's not. d4, d5, bishop f4, c5, e3, c takes d4, e takes d4, transposes to e4, c6, d4, d5, e d, c d, bishop f4. That is true, which is a sideline of the exchange variation in the Caro-Kann, and probably not critical. Not so sure about that. Again, 3 c3. At worst, one could play 3 c takes d4 and transpose to the exchange variation of the Slav. So where's the catch? Why is this not played more often? Is this simply due to the fact that most black players start with 1 knight to f6? Thanks. He's basically answering his own question, so maybe Joantspain just needed a forum. Yes, it is because most black players, me included, start with 1 knight f6 when that option is not on the table. So if you're a Nimzo player or a Grunfeld player or King's Indian player and so on, you cannot start the game with d4, d5. But if I'm reasonably certain that my opponent will play bishop here, then I'd probably also go d4, d5, bishop f4, c5. The one bonus option that white has on this move order is to play e4, some sort of Albin's gambit with an extra tempo, d takes e4, d5, which is not bad for white necessarily, but I still wouldn't be too afraid with black. You can choose here between a6 and g6. I believe both lead to a complicated game, but black should be fine. And we're pawn up after 3 moves, so how bad can it be? As to your general point that here, of course, we can take, well, after c3 we can also take. That's true, but I probably wouldn't. I think the London system is less dangerous than the line referenced in the exchange carol, where you will get this position. Or normally white would start with c3, bishop d3, but if we were to transpose to it. So in general, I think it's in black's favor to keep this tension and to wait for an opportune moment to determine if we should go c takes d4 or c4. Here we can transpose to knight f6, which would be my black repertoire, or we can go a move like bishop f5 and then trying to play e6 and knight f6 later, which, yeah, should be pretty reasonable. I see no particular reason why black should clarify the situation in the center directly. But yeah, you're not wrong, it transposes, and of course there's nothing wrong with it for black either. Thanks for the question, or the points really. Joantspain. Csaba is saying, hi Jan, is this position in the Benko legit? What do you mean by legit? 1 d4, knight f6, c4 c5, d5 b5, cb a6, b8 g6, knight c3, bishop takes a6, e4, queen to a5. I want to walk my king to g2, but black refuses to stop me from castling. This was recommended for black by Sergei Kasparov, I think, and Chess Explained, but I can't believe this is a real move. If black really needs to play like this, it makes me feel confident that this variation is the way to go. What should I do against it? I've never seen this particular idea until I've read this very question, but I'm with Csaba, it does look a little fishy. Speaking of a little fishy. Anyway, let's put it on the chessboard. Eventually. After a little break. My little tool is telling me, nope, no chess bait. No chess bait? No chessboard for you, sir. Which is fair enough, you could argue. I spend too much time in front of chessboards, and I should be granted a little break from it once in a while. The question is, how long shall we make that break? This is opening clinic. This is not one of these blah blah shows. This is a compact analysis of nonsense. Not always of nonsense. I don't think Czaba's line is nonsense. As you can see here, it doesn't allow me to make a move. It's annoying, actually. I'm annoyed. Come on, program. Get your act together. We don't do blindfold on this show. After all this expertise that I dropped already. All right, let's see. So d5, b5, c takes b, a6, go to Benko gambit. By the way, Csaba, am I mistaken, or are you always asking questions about the Benko gambit? You do, right? Is it a bit of a passion project of yours? So bishop takes a6, was it this position, e4, and here queen a5? Is this it? Looks strange. Basically, I'd be tempted to try to refute it or outright. Take here. There's other moves, like bishop d2, I'm sure is fine for white, and I'm sure bishop to d3, tending knight e2 and castle is also fine. Well, let's try to refute it. We take. Queen a6 stops castles, but doesn't work, because after e5, white is more or less winning. So knight a6 really is the only sensible move. Rook a6 is also too ugly to contemplate. So knight a6 is the only sensible move, and let's be aggressive for once. e5. Black hasn't played d6, so why not do this? Knight e4, knight e2. I'm guessing the point is bishop g7, target this pawn. We castle. You take the pawn. Now material is equal, so the only point of white's play would be to play bishop to h6. Or rook e1 and next move bishop to h6. To stop black from castling. And even though I have to admit that I did not check this till the end, it does strike me as very dangerous for black with his king caught in the center. d6, rook to e1. The plan is to play queen e2 and then f4 and checkmate the king, which is stuck in the middle of the board. My computer says the best move is f6. And yeah, knight e4 is another interesting move, but I like queen e2 as well. Trying to go f4, bishop d4, king h1. Black will probably have to castle queenside at some point, and that could end very, very badly for him. So I don't believe this is a serious line. I'm not sure if my bishop a6 has to be done, but I have a feeling if one investigated that till the end, it would probably turn out to be very, very good for white. Well, yeah, if you want to play something solid, knock yourself out. Play bishop d3, followed by knight e2. White should be slightly better there as well. No, I don't think this is a good line, I think, yeah. What's the trendy line? Bishop g7, no? e4 castles. And now after bishop e2, now you go queen a5. This is a different story. But the one you mentioned there, Csaba, I don't really trust. Now someone will tell me, but I've checked this till the end with my supercomputer. You're wrong. Could very well be. So don't trust it. What else is happening? Mr. FBardamu is saying, hello Jan, what is your opinion on the following variation of the Spanish exchange variation? e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop takes c6, d takes c6, castles f6, d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, and bishop to d6. The only high-profile player to have played this way was Grigorich in the 70s, but top players don't seem to want to play it. Is a refutation. Thanks for doing this. Kind regards. Thank you, FBardamu. And yeah, that's a bad line. Don't play it. Normally, if top players don't do it, they have a reason, or at least their engine is giving them something to think about. And yeah, bishop d6 in that position. It's just not good. In general, the exchange Spanish is not a bad opening. I'm always somewhat surprised we don't see it around more often. The problem from white's perspective is that black is such a broad choice here. Queen f6, bishop d6, pawn to f6, bishop g4, bishop e6, bishop e7, knight e7. You name it, all these moves are fairly playable. And you mentioned f6, d4, ed, knight takes d4. Here the main line is c5, even though recently black hasn't been playing this very much because white has been doing well in these endgames after both knight e2 and knight b3. So black players have started looking for other spots. And here bishop d6, yeah, it's not good. It's a little slow. The most accurate way for white to play is queen h5 check, provoking another weakness with g6. Now queen to f3, stopping black from developing this knight. And black just has an unpleasant position here. So no reason to go for this. Here you could grab pawn with bishop h2, king h2, queen d4. But the white compensation is pretty overwhelming. Knight c3, bishop to f4, rook to d1. What can I say? It's bad. And engines will yell at you instantly that it's bad. So I don't expect a comeback by this move. Of course, it's probably not a losing mistake, but there are better lines to play against the exchange. Spanish, like the ones that I've mentioned. Bishop d6. If you want to do this, it's better to start like this here after d4, ed. Let's say knight takes d4 was played. You would not play the move f6. You'd play either knight to f6 or queen to h4. So white can go queen takes d4, and here f6 makes more sense because the white pieces are placed much more poorly. This is actually a playable line as far as I know. So yeah, don't follow Grigorich on that one. What's next? The TheKnightking. Oh, with a K. So it's not a Game of Thrones reference. Or maybe it is. He's saying, hi Jan, love your work here on Chess24. Keep up to it. Thank you, thank you. My question is about avoiding the Zuckertort. What's a good way to play if white rushes to play b3 and bishop b2? For example, d4, knight f6, knight f3, d5, b3, c5, bishop b2. And now I'm not in time to close this bishop in by taking early on d4. I would say it differently. White has not been in time in your line to support his pawn on d4, so you take there and you're better. By the way, do you plan on making a short video series for us black e4, e5 players against the multiple white choices besides 3 bishop b5 and 3 bishop c4? Like what to play against your beloved King's Gambit, the Scotch I guess, or 2 knight c3. Don't currently plan it. I've done this on an older DVD and I don't like repeating myself, and against most of the sidelines sort of the theory hasn't changed that much. But if I have enough to say, enough new things to say on these topics, I might do one day, but it's not currently a priority. So let's answer the question. What was your move order? d4, knight f6, knight f3, d5, b3, c5. And now you don't want to go e3, but bishop b2. But I go cd4. Black is better. So I'm not sure what you're worried about here. If knight takes d4, we can go e5 and already grab a lot of space in the center. The best move seems to be knight to f3. But here, since white hasn't played e3, black can just keep pushing. e4, knight d4, e3. This is a typical pawn sacrifice. And this position is already very unpleasant for white. After f takes e3, black has several tempting options. But if you just develop very quickly here, bishop c5, castles, rook e8, knight to g4. Black is very much in the driver's seat, so this is unplayable for white. And yeah, if bishop takes d4, knight to c6, targets the bishop immediately, bishop b2, bishop g4. Once again, black is much better. So no, your line is one of the rare positions where black is better after 4 moves, which I think is a reasonable price to pay for not having blocked this bishop in. That doesn't work. White should play e3. And then after knight c6, bishop b2, we're in standard Zuckertort territory, where now we can take on d4. Or, I forgot, I'm sure I gave stuff about this in my video series. Maybe we can start with bishop to g4 as well. But yeah, trying to do without e3 for white is not a good idea after c5. C takes d4 is very much a threat here. Especially if black hasn't played knight c6 yet, because then there is no Grunfeld-esque idea of, just as an example, with the knight on c6 here, you could make a case for this, because then you can exchange knights. But after cd, knight d4, e5, black will just be very happy. So, no, that doesn't work, the Knight King. Or nothing to worry about at the very least. Who's next? Borxting. What's he saying? He's saying, hey Jan, I've studied your repertoire against d4, but I'm not really excited playing the trendy pawn sec in the Vienna. I was considering to study the Ragozin and transposing into the repertoire. I know what you're talking about. And now to my question, what lines do you have to analyze if you want to switch to the Ragozin? I don't want to follow your repertoire, but I want you to tell me what to follow. No, I get your point though, and I've mentioned that point many times as well, that you could play the Ragozin and transpose to the Vienna. So let's try to illustrate what he's talking about. He's saying after d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, d takes c4, he's unhappy about this line, this pawn sacrifice with bishop takes c4, even though Karana has recently been doing pretty well against it, for example in a game against Aronian. But he's saying, I'm comfortable with the rest of the Vienna, but I would like to transpose to it, for example to this position, after dc, e4, bishop b4, bishop g5, without having to deal with this pawn sacrifice with bishop takes c4. So he would like to play bishop to b4, the Ragozin. And then after bishop g5, go d takes c4, which is a mover that many top players like to employ as well. And the question is, what else does black have to know here after bishop b4? The answer is quite a bit. This is, major opening system, the main lines you would have to study are c takes d5, e takes d5, and now bishop g5. When, yeah, black faces a broad choice. Knight bd7, h6. Sorry. Knight bd7, h6, castles, c5. Currently the trend is something like, not h5, but h6. Bishop h4, castles, e3, bishop f5. So yeah, that could be a good starting point for you. But that's certainly one has to study. Bishop f4 here as well, even though black hasn't had real problems dealing with that. Then, yeah, after bishop g5, dc, you're happy you can transpose. Another independent line you would have to know is queen a4 check. Knight c6, and now either some bishops to g5, or cd followed by bishop g5, or e3 in this position, castles, and either queen to c2, or bishop to d2. Now those lines are winning for white, but yeah, this is the extra body of theory that the Ragozin brings with it. I guess those are the main lines. e3 you transpose to the Nimzo, bishop g5 you transpose to the Vienna. So yeah, cd followed by bishop g5 and queen a4 check lines. Best of luck, Mr. Borxting. Who's next? Daffy Duck. Very interesting openings, Mr. Daffy Duck. It's a surprise. I always thought Bugs Bunny would be the chess player, but I was wrong. Did I make the exact same joke last season? Maybe. He's saying, hi Jan, my question is about 1b3 or 1 knight f3 and 2b3. Even though your question is really about 1b3, isn't it? Why do top 10 players play like this? Can white achieve something after e5, bishop b2, knight c6, e3, knight f6, bishop b5, bishop d6? Why not d6? Knight a3, knight a5, or 5e4, or 5a6. Do you think 1e5 is the best line on 1b3? Oof, so much b3 information in that little question. And long story short, I think black's fine after b3, but I believe so do... Oops, sorry. Top 10 players, what they want to do with it is the good old get a game, get a fresh position. And I'm guessing, I haven't really done the math on this topic, but I'm guessing it's maybe the 5th best move white has. So e4, d4, knight f3, c4, g3. Now those are all better. So then, yeah, maybe 6th best. Knight c3, b3, and d4, c4, knight f3 are all sort of connected to each other and can lead to transpositions, while 1e4, of course, is its own beast. Well, b3 does, I don't think white is fine, and it does lead to reasonably fresh positions that you don't get so much in the other lines. So I'm assuming that's the reasoning when you see guys like Nakamura play 1b3. They want to play chess and hope this is not too theoretical. But as you've mentioned, 1b3 has its own body of theory. And I agree that e5 is very logical. Now you're trying to block this bishop. I don't know how white gets an advantage if I go, let's say, d5, bishop b2, bishop f5, or even knight f6 followed by e6. But e5 does feel very logical. So e5, bishop b2, knight c6, e3, knight f6. I also have a bit of a soft spot for d5 here, but no one's doing that. So knight f6, bishop to b5. Yes, why not d6? I'm not sure, but yeah, d6 is not that popular here. I guess people don't like to deal with these early d4s, even though not that scary either. And yeah, you mentioned the other moves here, bishop to d6 or pawn to e4. I think both are fine for black. Bishop to d6 looks a little artificial, but black just wants to castle rook e8. And then, either get the bishop out of the way and move the d pawn later, or more typically play a6 and recapture with the d pawn on c6. So I think that's fine, especially I like this line after knight a3, which was a bit of an argument against it, trying to go knight c4. That now black can say, haha, you're not an a3 is stupid, now I'll go bishop e7, because you're no longer threatening to take, since your knight is now hanging. Or I think we go bc actually. Yeah, we go bc of course. Since your knight on a3 would now be hanging. And next move I'll play d6. I've always been a fan of that idea. And e4 we've recently seen in the game Nakamura Shankland. Also seemed fine for black, frankly. So I'm with you. b3, not that scary. I think e5, knight c6, knight f6 is fine. Top 10 players play it because they're sick of mainline openings, and this at least is a very fresh position, you know. We haven't moved the knights, and the positions aren't that explored yet, that it's not a better win situation here after e4, f3, or knight e2, or whatever you want to do. Like, it's still a lot of chess to be played. But I don't think your engine will be yelling that white is doing great in any of those lines. So, nothing to be too afraid of this b3 move. Thuri, he's saying, "Hi Jan, I like to play the classical line against the King's Indian defense. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, bishop e2, e5, castles, knight c6, d5, knight e7, knight e1, knight d3, f5, f3, f4. Does this line promise white an advantage? And if yes, why do we see it so rarely in top-level chess? Is it because Van Kampen says that white and black neutralize each other? Thanks in advance, Thuri." I don't know. I like to think that top-level chess is heavily influenced by Robin Van Kampen's video series on the King's Indian, because it's a good series, and I recommend it to everybody. It's here on Chess24. Go look for it. Robin, I think, talked about that line. I'm assuming you mean the main line with bishop d2 quite extensively. So I think the next question is actually about the same topic, so if you guys don't mind, I will try to handle them together. Secondwind is saying, "Hi Jan, I'd like to ride along Thuri's wave. What about the line where you play bishop d2 before f3 and only after the black knight leaves the protection of c5 you play f3? I'm talking about knight d3, f5, bishop d2, knight f6, f3. First of all, I'd like to know, is 11 f takes e4 instead of knight f6 a good move? That would be the only reason I can imagine for playing f3. An additional, not so important question. I know this line has tons of theory after bishop d2, knight f6, f3, and sometimes black gets a horrifying attack going for no apparent reason. Is this still playable for those willing to suffer as white? Depends on your definition of suffering and on your tastes and all that stuff. I think, as far as I know, not much has changed theoretically since Robin's video series, and from what I've seen, his claim that black and white sort of balance each other out is still very true in that line. It was a hot topic for a while. But yeah, it seemed to me that black sort of knows how to deal with it, and it hasn't been that popular since. But I'm not an expert. I'm generally not very comfortable with all these lines where you go for these castles and then knight to e1 and you tell black, please try to checkmate me. And I will try to eat all your queenside in the meantime. Mainly because I'm not very good at avoiding getting checkmated there. And even if your computer says +2, that's the problem with analyzing these positions. It still can very often happen that you get checkmated, because there's always a lot of practical problems dealing with the black attack. So I've never been a big fan from a practical perspective. From a computer-wise perspective, it seemed to me like black is also doing more or less okay. But let's look at it in detail. First of all, Secondwind was saying it's smart to start with bishop d2, and then we only meet knight f6 with f3, because now the road is cleared for the c-pawn, which is a valid argument, even though I think in practice it doesn't make much of a difference. Well, my point is, if we go f3 here, let's say f4, bishop d2, g5. White players pretty much always play knight, rook c1, knight g6, c5 here anyway, even though the knight is still here. And I think practice has shown that the best way to play is knight to f6, not accepting this pawn sacrifice when we get to the same lines as the main line anyway. So I don't think there's a big difference. And f takes e4, it's another one of those. Computers normally like take f takes e4 in such positions, but King's Indian players will never play it. And in practice, even if a computer says this is something like this is close to equal, it's similar to what I said about the Leningrad Dutch earlier, that once the position opens up, I'm normally a believer in white here because the black king has a little less shelter, even though you could certainly argue about that. But this plan and then trying to stabilize on the white light squares, I would take white, even though objectively it's probably very close to equal. but most black players wouldn't do it. As I said though, I don't think there's a drawback to starting with f3, so I don't think it matters all that much. Now for the line that, yeah, you guys are wondering what's going on here, or I'm guessing this is also the line that Thuri meant. Of course there's alternatives after f3, but this is the trendy stuff. So I am guessing this is the position we're talking about. It's all fairly established by now. Black makes the typical King's Indian moves, like rook f7, intending bishop f8, h5, rook g7. White is provoking this weakness here, bishop a5, b6, this fake piece sacrifice, which black shouldn't accept. C takes d, c takes d. I think earlier we had a question about bishop b4 here, and I pointed out that this doesn't help white, so white should immediately go back to e1. And we talked a bit about this stuff, a6, knight c3, and a5. Stopping knight to b4. With, according to Robin, and I think I agree with him, a roughly balanced position. There's also g4 here, which I believe Nakamura played against Ragozin maybe, leading to a sharp game. But yeah, I like this a6, a5 business, stopping that b4, and making it hard for white to do too much damage on the queen side. There's many moves here. I think knight f2 is what they typically do now, trying to set up something like knight to b5, h3, rook to c3, maybe king to h1. Stabilize the first line of defense. And these positions, one can always try to go deeper here and analyze them further. And yeah, depending on what engine you're using, you might get the occasional 0-40 for white or not, but I find them not that tempting to play with white. Rook b8 and this. There's always long-term plans. For black to improve the position, he has to be careful that then his queen side doesn't collapse. But if white tries to make an aggressive gesture on the queen side, tries to use more pieces here, he also has to be very, very cautious about black breaking through. So, as I said, I'm with Robin. I think it's objectively equal, finely balanced. And I'm not a fan of it from the white side. But I also have not spent many, many hours analyzing this kind of action. So there might be more optimistic people than me regarding that topic out there. I believe that's it. That was the last question for Jan's opening clinic. Number 20. Thank you guys for watching, and thanks for the questions. I hope you're alright with this new format. If you have ideas on how to make it better, let me know. But for now, we'll keep it going, and hopefully we'll have a bunch of new exciting opening questions in Season 21, starting next week. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time. Oh, I should mention, check out my new video series if you haven't seen it yet. Maybe you have some questions about that. Extending our black repertoire towards one knight f3, one c4, and one g3. It's always tough to cover everything in these video series, so if we can fill in some gaps in these opening clinics, I'm happy to do it. See you guys next time. Bye.